flats. In some places, the bushes grow close to one another, and small birds flutter among the branches. The birds don't sing, and the silence of the desert is broken only briefly by the flutter of their wings. There are paths in the desert where passing animals have walked the weak grasses into extinction. These tracks, unlike the railroad, follow no set direction. They wander aimlessly through the flats and up and down the banks of the dry rivers, heading to destinations unknown. The age of the tracks is impossible to tell, for the grass grows back slowly in those parts of Australia. In the early morning of a day long after the war, a small figure walked slowly along one of the winding tracks somewhere to the east of Tennant Creek. On close examination, the figure didn't look any different from most of his kind. He was about 2 feet tall and covered with short brown fur. He had a short, thick tail that dragged the ground when he walked upright, and a duck-like bill where any other animal would have a nose. The only thing that set Albert apart from any other platypus was that he was carrying an empty soft drink bottle. It was his possession of a bottle, coupled with the fact that he was hundreds of miles north of any running water, that made him different. Albert had crept away from the railway station at Tennant Creek and into the desert 3 nights before. For the first day after leaving the station, he had walked along the railroad track. A train had come by late in the afternoon, and Albert had hidden himself in a bush near the roadbed. No one had seen him, but he was almost hit by a half-full bottle of Melbourne bitter thrown from a second-class coach. After that, Albert stayed away from the tracks. From a distance, he had paralleled the roadbed north for the last 2 days, because without that landmark, Albert would have been hopelessly lost. As it was, he was just confused. The problem was that Albert had no idea where he was going, or exactly what he was looking for. The stories had been vague at best. Somewhere in the desert, a place where old Australia still existed. Keep going north. The promised land. Those descriptions had sounded good in Adelaide, but they were worthless in the desert where every direction looked the same. His escape from Adelaide and the trip to Tennant Creek had been easier than he expected. Security on the smaller animals was minimal. It had been only a matter of time before a careless attendant left his enclosure latch unfastened. Then, a quick midnight run through the deserted park and a short swim across the River Torrens had gotten him into the city proper. Some of the larger animals had been brought to Adelaide by train and then to the zoo by lorry. They told him about the trains and described how to reach the railroad yards. Traffic on the city streets was infrequent late at night, and Albert managed to get across town to the station by hiding behind rubbish bins from the occasional passing automobile. After that, he had hopped a freight to Alice Springs and then another to Tennant Creek, the entire trip courtesy of the South Australia Railway. With the limited resources available to him, Albert had tried to prepare for the journey. He had saved part of his meal at each feeding and put the grubs into a discarded popcorn box he had pulled into his cage when no one was looking. Water he had taken from his dish and put in the stolen soft drink bottle. His planning had gotten him to Alice Springs and then to the desert outside Tennant Creek. Now he was out of food, out of water, and out of plans. He had filled his bottle the night he left the train at Tennant Creek, but his bottle didn't hold that much. The water had run out yesterday, and Albert knew that if he didn't find more that day, he would die. A platypus is an animal that lives in or near water all its life, and can't survive without it. He didn't mind the dying as much as he minded not living long enough to find the place he was looking for. Somewhere without people and without zoos. Albert continued to walk north. He had decided to get as far away from Adelaide as he could before the end. His eyes were red-rimmed from the sun, and his fur was discoloured from the reddish dust his feet kicked up as he walked. He had given up trying to make sense of the faint trails that occasionally crossed his path. Albert clutched the empty soft drink bottle and put one webbed foot in front of the other, moving slowly toward the distant horizon. As the day grew longer, Albert began to hallucinate. Streams of water would mix with the heat waves rising in the air, and Albert could see the Murray River. He could feel himself slide down the mud ramp in front of his burrow and into the coolness of the river. He would float down the river and watch the green banks pass by. Just when he was sure that he was back for good in the place where he was born, the river would evaporate, and he could see faces smeared with cotton candy and jaws that dribbled popcorn. The faces laughed, and handless fingers poked at him through wire mesh. The horror of the visions.